Hello and good evening. It's time for Tell Me Why, and we're going to read the Book of Goblins today. Because I'm scared that the game suddenly will cut off and I can't go back to reading all of that. And also because I'm not in a very explorative mood today. But I guess at first we have to see whatever situation the game is throwing me in.
Got everything you need, by the way?
Yeah, I'm good.
Man, I'm so gonna miss this.
Miss what?
Just hanging out and fishing and... I'm not gonna have a lot of time after we move to Juneau with school and the JC and everything.
Right.
I guess we have
So
to
did any
fish
of the
first.
people you came up with at Fireweed land in Juneau?
Oh, I'm not sure. Once they left, I never really kept in touch.
Really?
Some of them were straight up awesome, but we just weren't that close, you know?
None of them really got, like, family?
I mean, I guess I got pretty tight with my counselor, Aaron, but I already have a family.
Well, there's a reason we think of families as trees. They keep on sprouting new branches and...
Oh, hey, I think I've got a bite.
You got this. Reel them in.
Okay.
Come on, pull up on the rod.
Hold S to keep the marker in the sweet spot.
Reel them in.
Palia has trained me for
Now
this
give it a nice
moment.
pull.
I got it. Slept a little. Got it.
Bravo.
The subtitle being
First of many.
effort sound.
Pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Thanks, Sensei.
Oh, hey, did you want to make solid plans to hit the buzzard hole? The river might ice over soon, so we shouldn't wait too long.
Yeah, sure.
Sweet. I was planning to go Saturday. I'll pick you up on the way out.
Cool. I'll set my alarm to ass crack of dawn.
I still can't open the Book of Goblins. Oh, it sucks.
You have this whole fancy bag just for ice fishing?
We don't mix and match. Ever.
Jeez, you don't mess around, do you?
Told you earlier. I'm a very serious man.
I should have said this earlier, but thanks for doing all this.
You're making it sound like it's a big deal again. This is what friends do. Besides, I wanted to see if all this talk of yours was just that.
Your verdict?
You're doing pretty well, but don't let it go to your head. Still plenty of time for ego to get the best of you.
Yes, sir. All right, here we go.
Guess I should fish again.
I'm here. Okay. How about them apples?
Oh, nice job. So, you weren't all talk.
Impressed?
I only see 2 fish in my cooler.
For now. So you gonna tell me what's in the cooler, or what?
I could tell you. Or I could watch you squirm a bit longer.
Ugh, you're a terrible person. You know that?
You betcha.
So, about last night. I don't know what Allison said, but from my side, well, I thought we were on the same page. But it turns out we weren't.
Hey, so don't tell her I told you, but last week your sister was almost unbearable. She was jumping up and down with excitement at you coming back.
Really?
You better believe it. Look, the last time you saw each other, you were kids. Just because things have changed doesn't mean you can't work it out.
I know. It's probably my fault. I really pushed her last night. I just don't get why she always has to run away from everything.
You blame her?
Avoiding the problem doesn't make it go away. She's so fixated on selling the house. It's like she's trying to bury the past. All of it. Even the good parts.
Look, I'm not picking sides here. Okay, but she's been murder house girl ever since it happened. Now she's got a chance to put it behind her and start fresh. Shit, I'd be pretty eager too.
I guess I didn't really think about that. I've been so focused on my own shit. It's been hard, you know? Figuring out how to live out here.
You mean outside of fireweed?
Yeah. When I first got there, all I could think about was getting out. It felt like a cage. But after a while, it started to feel more like a shell. I figured out who I was in there. But now I've got to work out how to be that person out here.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, none of us really know what we're doing. Like, shit may look bleak now, but your sister's never gonna give up on you. And you can lean on me too if you want. Just be careful, okay? Got a bad left shoulder.
I'll keep it in mind. Thanks for listening.
Don't mention it.
Don't you say anything. I got this.
I just want to read, not fish.
Come on, pull up on the rod.
Maybe we manage to get at least an achievement for fishing the most fish or something. Making it worth my efforts.
Easy. Oh. Whoa. Bam. 3 out of 3.
Well played. I got nothing. That
Yay!
was clean.
I'm a little disappointed.
Yep.
Hey, can I ask you something that's pretty personal?
Sure. Take off the gloves.
You've been with people, right? Romantically?
Yeah. A few. Have you?
No, not really.
That's kind of surprising.
Not feeling any of these answers, to be honest.
I never really thought about it. It just wasn't a priority, I guess.
I get it. You've had a lot on your plate.
Yeah, definitely.
You want my take on it?
Sure.
Heartbreak sucks. Look, I stopped listening to the entire indie folk genre just because I was dumped at a show once. But I put myself back out there just like everyone who's ever gotten their heart stomped on. Because when you meet someone who really sees you, you don't have to pretend anymore.
Yeah, let's get romantic.
And you're still interested in being that someone? Even after all the shit that's happened?
Hey, I've got baggage too. I think it's worth a chance. Don't you?
I think we're in total agreement here.
Yeah?
Yeah. I get this feeling like I could say or do anything with you, and it'd be cool. I feel safe.
You are. Because your sister would kill me if I did you dirty.
Yeah, she would.
So, doesn't look like you're catching anything with that. You want me to show you how it's done?
Go for it.
This dialogue just didn't make any sense. He just complimented me for my 3 fish.
Hey, you're missing the show.
Did he remove his clothes? No, he didn't. It's just wishful thinking on my behalf. Now kiss.
You okay?
I just want to read the fucking book.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
One way to put it.
He's pissed, isn't
Hey,
she?
Allie. I think I'll just show myself out.
Okay, call me later?
You know I will.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's totally fine. We were done anyway.
Catch anything?
Mostly ice, but yeah.
Tyler, I'm sorry for freaking out yesterday. All of this, it's just been really hard on me.
Don't apologize. I was being an asshole. We should have never pushed you that hard.
Come here.
It's like the sound quality changed.
God, why did I miss you so much? It's only been a day.
I've been told I have that effect on people.
You dum-dum. Okay, so I need to show you something.
What? You're kind of weirding me out.
Can we sit down for a sec?
Yay, Book of Goblins. Okay. Now, let's start at the beginning. The frog earns the right to speak. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a big frog in a small pond. He was a peaceful creature who spent most of her time eating, swimming, and sleeping. From the morning to the evening, she did everything the smaller frogs did, except she did it bigger. She ate more, she jumped farther, was smaller, and she made much more noise. Everybody in the forest could hear her loud croaking, and everybody was happy that they could. You see, it was easy to get lost in the forest, but thanks to the frog's loud noises, you could just as easily find your way back to a pond. Maybe it would not have been the same if the big frog had kept singing during the night, but she was much too lazy an animal to stay active after dark. One day, an unknown visitor came to the forest for the first time. It was a young woman, dressed in a beautiful gown. She was walking fast through the woods as if she was running away, and she never looked back. Many eyes spied the princess pass by, but no one dared to help her, for the mad hunter was on her trail. "This is not our business," they said, and We had better look away, for the Mad Hunter was an unyielding man who loved nothing but hunting down prey for money and glory. Nothing could escape his piercing eye for long. So, the princess walked alone, without help, until she was hopelessly lost in the big forest. Exhausted, she pressed on with no idea of where she was heading, as the hunter drew ever closer, dogged in his pursuit. She continued this way until she heard a heavy croaking far off to her left, so clear and loud that the princess immediately made for the source of the noise. A few minutes later, she reached the big frog in the small pond, and the frog looked at her with a gentle smile. "Help me, please," said the princess. "I need a place to rest and hide." "Ribbit," answered the frog, and the princess frowned. "Please stop making noise. The Mad Hunter is after me." "Ribbit," said the frog again, so loud that the princess had to cover her ears. The creature began to jump every which way. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "Stop all that noise, or he will find us." But the frog kept croaking and jumping around her, left and right, up and down, ribbit, ribbit, until the princess understood the meaning of all this fuss. Cautiously, the woman climbed on the back of the big animal, and then, with a leap, the frog set off away from the pond. The frog jumped so high and so far that even the hunter could not find where the princess had gone. With a few jumps, the princess was out of his piercing eye. A few jumps more, and she had vanished for good. The princess closed her eyes and let her clever mount carry her wherever the creature pleased. Less than an hour later, the big frog had reached the other side of the ancient forest, near the shores of the very deep lake. There she landed without a noise in front of a big wooden house that had been abandoned. "Thank you," said the princess, covering the animal's snout with kisses. "I only wished you could speak, so I would have understood what you were trying to do sooner." As she pronounced those words, something incredible happened. The big frog was suddenly able to speak. The first words startled the princess. "The Mad Hunter is always at my heels. Now you are safe, and I've had my revenge. You can stay in this house. It has been abandoned for a long time, and no one will look for you here." And then, without looking back, the big frog jumped back to the pond. And this is how the big frog saved the princess and how she earned the right to speak. So we have we've read the story before, and we know the princess is the mom of our two protagonists. I'm not sure who the frog is. Maybe the frog is just the fairy that brings one out to this place. I don't really know if we are supposed to know yet. Okay. The bear and the princess. I think the bear is Sam. I'm not absolutely sure though. Also, I'm just now realizing there's a fox hiding in the woods over here. Once upon a time, in the ancient and deep forest, the old bears stood on the bank of the river, swiping at salmon on the way to the spawning grounds. Just as he'd got his paw on a particularly fat one, he heard a woman shouting for help. He considered simply eating his salmon, but then she screamed again, and he lumbered over to investigate. After a short walk, he found the princess clinging to the top of the tree, while a wolf snarled and snapped at the base of the tree. Old Bear would normally not get in the middle of such a situation. After all, as a fellow predator, he understood the wolf's need to hunt. But when he saw the princess, he was struck by her beauty, and he knew he had to help. With a great roar, the bear heaved onto his hind legs, rising to his full height. The wolf snapped and snarled in his direction, but the bear roared again, and the wolf took off into the trees, tail between his legs. The old bear fell back down onto all fours and stared up at the princess. She regarded him fearfully. "You can come down," he said. "How do I know you didn't save me just so you could eat me yourself?" asked the princess. "I suppose this is a fair question," admitted the old bear, "but I promise I won't eat you." The princess had no reason to trust the old bear, except that he had kind eyes, and so she slowly made her way down the tree. When she reached the ground, the bear only watched her, and so she supposed she was not going to be eaten today. "Thank you," she told the old bear. "Of course," he said. "Can I walk with you back to your home?" "Of course," said the princess. And so the princess and the old bear walked together through the forest back to the big wooden house. After that day, the princess would occasionally find gifts from the bear: a fresh caught salmon, a handful of ripe berries, a newly bloomed bluebell. One spring, when a sudden thaw flooded the path out of the old princess's home, the old bear was there, and she rode his back across the river. The old bear began to think that the princess should be his mate. After all, she had no mate, and she needed one. And he could keep her warm and provide her much more suitable den, and catch fish for her, and protect her from wolves. She, in turn, would brush out his fur and pick berries without smooshing half of them, and scratch that one part of his back he couldn't reach. And with how she took care of the goblins, she would be an excellent mother for his cubs. One day the old bear came with a ring of spruce and asked the princess to be his bride. "I'm sorry," said the princess, "you are a very good friend, and I appreciate all you've ever done for me, but I cannot marry you. You are a bear, and I'm a princess. It would never work." The old bear was crushed. "Can we still be friends?" he asked. "You will always be friends," said the princess, "but I will never marry you." The old bear and the princess carried out their friendship, and after 1 year he tried again to ask her to be his bride, but once again she refused him. This happened 1 year later, and 1 year after that, and then finally the princess said, "Old bear, you are my dear friend, and I appreciate all you've done for me, but I would sooner you have left me to the wolves than marry you, and this is how it will always be. I have my hands full with the 2 goblins who live under my house, and they are all I need." That wounded the old bear deeply, but it was finally enough to stop his proposals. They remained friends, and he continued to give her gifts of fresh salmon and ripe berries, and newly bloomed bluebells, but the old bear never again asked the princess to be his bride, much as he might have wanted to. And that is how the princess befriended the old bear, and how she refused him. That's a very sad story. Okay, the beaver, I don't know what the beaver is doing with the house. Fixes the house, okay. The beaver fixes the house. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. One night, a particularly violent storm shook the house. It shook the shingles on the roof and the planks in the walls. It even shook the beams on which the house stood, blowing the whole thing near to the ground. The princess hid in a closet, fearing the house would come down on her as she slept. In the morning, the house was still standing, but it was badly damaged. The storm had blown shingles off the roof and planks off the walls, and even bent a post upon which the house stood. The first 2 things she could fix, but the last one concerned her. "What will I do?" despaired the wise princess, for though she knew many things, she did not know how to fix the big wooden house. Just then, the old bear came by to see if the princess had any trouble in the storm. When he found her nailing planks back into place, he said, "Stop, princess, let me do them for you." "I'm happy to do it," said the princess, "but if you want to help with the roof, you may." When the pair were done with the roof and the walls, they examined the bent support post. "I could throw my body against it," said the old bear. "I am very large." He stretched up onto his hind legs, being sure the princess could appreciate how very large he was, then charged straight at the post. He threw his body against it with an impressive thud. The impact moved the post, but too far, and it ended up bent the other direction. The wise princess decided more precision was needed. He saw then of the very old beaver, who kept an excellent crafted dam. Perhaps she can help. She went looking for the very old beaver and found the industrious animal hard at work, slapping down mud on a part of her dam that had been blown apart in the storm. Most of the structure was unharmed, because the beaver was very good at building things. The princess knew she had come to the right place. "Beaver," she said, "my house was damaged in the storm. Would you help me fix it?" "I believe I could do that, yes," said the very old beaver, and she paused at fixing her own den to follow the princess. The very old beaver examined the big wooden house and nodded. "It will be an easy fix," she said, and she set about riding the post with loud slaps of her tail. When she was done, the wise princess stroked the beaver's head. "Thank you, beaver," she said. The wind blew the shingles of the roof and the planks of the walls and even bent the post. "Now, thanks to you, I still have a home." "Think nothing of it," said the very old beaver, who returned to work on her own den once again. That winter, the very old beaver grew ill, very ill. She was not able to fix her den, not to gather food. When the princess found out, she set out about delivering meals to the beaver. She brought stews of corn and beans and basket full of bark, and twigs from the beaver's favorite aspen. One day, the wise princess noticed that the beaver's den had begun to fall apart. She set about fixing it, and though she was not as talented as the very old beaver, the fix kept the creature warm and dry. "Thank you," said the very old beaver. "Of course," said the princess. "You helped me when the storm blew my house near to the ground. Thanks to you, I still have a home. And I am happy to do the same." The princess continued to nurse the old beaver until the day she came to the dam and the forest was still. No birds sang, no branches rustled, no small things skittered within the underbrush. "Oh," said the princess, staring sadly at the dam, for she knew the old beaver had passed on. "Goodbye, my friend." And that is how the very old beaver saved the big wooden house and how the wise princess repaid her kindness. Not sure who this is either. Might have been the mom of Addie. Okay. The princess's party. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the princess was melancholy because it was the 1-year anniversary of when she had run away from home. Sensing her sadness, her forest friends showed up at her door. They were headed by the pelican, pious and attentive, and organized by the moose, stalwart and farsighted. The old bear was there, with his claws so sharp, as well as the big frog, prattling away. Even the haughty muskrat, who almost never had time for anyone, had come. The bear invited her to ride on his back, promising no wolf would hurry her path. And then the animals led her to a fairy glen, where a fabulous party had been prepared. There was a buffet of seafood the pelican had served from her never-emptying beak. The air was filled with winking fairy lights the moose had arranged after clouds filled the sky, and the gregarious frog mixed up fizzing drinks. Only the muskrat had done nothing in particular, mooching of everyone else's hard work. The princess had a very good time at her party, such a good time that she forgot to say thank you to any of her friends. Noticing this, the fairies devised a bit of a mischief. When the princess went to open her gifts, she found 3 identical boxes off the edge of the glen. Puzzled, she turned back and gasped. The entire party had vanished. "Because you have taken your friends for granted," called the naughty fairies. "We have hidden them from you. But we like games. Guess who has given you each of the presents, and you'll get your friends back." The princess opened the first box. Inside there was a torch, which, when lit, revealed the truth. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I don't get lost in the woods when it's dark, that I always see right from wrong. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that?" He opened the second box. Inside there was a magic sword, which would leap right out of the bearer's hands to defend them. Said the princess. "Someone wants to make sure I am protected if I'm ever under threat. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that?" She opened the third box. Inside there was a bag of coins that always provided money if it was for something the bearer truly needed. Said the princess. Someone wants to make sure I have money to buy food when I am hungry and clothes when I'm cold. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that? The princess thought about her friends and then she smiled certainly. Fairies, she said. I may have been thoughtless, but I appreciate all that my friends has given to me and all that they have done for me. She gave her answers, and the waxed fairies were forced to restore the party in a flash of colorful light. One by one, she gave the animals a hug and thanked them for the presents, the party, and all they had done to help since she'd moved into the forest. And that is how the princess celebrated her first anniversary in the woods. This was part of a little quest earlier in the game in chapter 1. And I think I didn't get it completely right, but I do think the pelican is Tessa from the store that kept giving her money. I'm not sure about the others. The Goblins and the Ice Cave. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins were playing near the glacier when they discovered a hole in the ice. They crept through a gradually widening passage and found themselves inside a spacious ice cave. Lights spilled down the undulating blue-white walls in a way that made them look like electric waterfalls, and a column made up of hundreds of icicles stood in the center. This was a time before the goblins had settled beneath the old wooden house, and they had nowhere to live. Perhaps we could live here, they said excitedly. Moments later, the sound of stomping feet interrupted their play, and they realized that perhaps someone already lived there. They hid behind a boulder to wait and see who was coming. The old bear sauntered into the cave, shaking powdery snow from his coat. He let out a giant yawn and lay down in the corner on a pile of 3 bows, snoring within seconds. When they were sure he was deep asleep, the goblins conspired to claim the cave for themselves. They chipped away at the glacier until they had filled a basket full of ice, then hid once more behind their boulder and started tossing chunks of it on the sleeping bear. Now, Old Bear was not the smartest creature in the forest, so when he woke up covered in ice, he roared, "My cave is collapsing!" Then he lumbered to his feet and ran outside, before the whole thing could come down on top of him. The goblins crept out after him and did a loop before coming back to find him sitting outside. "What happened?" they asked. "My cave, it's collapsing," bemoaned the old bear. "And it's time for me to hibernate. Where will I stay for the winter?" It had not occurred to the goblins that the old bear had settled in for the winter, and they felt a little bad. But they did not want the old bear to know what they had done, so instead they offered to help him with a new den. Together they searched. They inspected cavernous stone and hollowed trees and deeply pocketed knolls. Nothing they found was as beautiful as the ice cave, but the old bear settled on a packed Carthen Hollow. I don't know what that is. Carthen Hollow that would keep him warm and dry for his long sleep. "Good night," he yawned, and the goblins gleefully returned to their new house. In the spring, the old bear woke and went for a nice long walk to stretch his legs. His path took him right up to his old cave, where he heard the curious sound of laughter. Making his way inside, he was surprised to find that his cave was intact, and the goblins were inside, playing a game. "What is this?" growled the old bear. The goblins stopped playing and looked ashamed. "We're sorry, old bear," said the goblins, "but we had nowhere to live, and it's just so beautiful. We didn't realize you were about to hibernate, and then we couldn't bear to tell you what we'd done." The old bear was angry at the trick, but the young goblins looked appropriately ashamed, and so he said, "Come with me." He led the crafty goblins to the hollow in which he had hibernated for the winter. "You two can have this spot," he said. "And look, someone had built a big wooden house right on top of over it." "No one lives there now," said Old Bear, "but one day, maybe someone will." The earthen hollow was not as beautiful as the ice cave, but it kept the goblins warm and dry. And they were excited that someday they might have someone living overhead. Someone who baked cakes and tolerated their mischief. And that is the story of how the crafty goblins tried to steal the cave of the old bear, and how they got their own instead. The Princess and the Two Thieves. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. The house was built from the strong wood of the forest, and it kept the princess warm and safe. The princess was not a native of the forest, but she never spoke about where she had come from, for it made her cry. She did not have many friends, but that was how she liked it. The forest was big and deep, and many paths led to her house, but not many visitors passed by. The princess was happy to be left alone in the big house in the deep forest. She knew that the forest would provide for her, but that its generosity had to be respected, so she only took what she needed. And for a long time, life was just fine for the princess in the big wooden house. One winter day, when snow blanketed the earth and ice bent the trees low, the wise princess realized that food was disappearing from her house. It was not much at first, only a few fruits and nuts and eggs vanishing during the night. Maybe it's the birds, she said, or the mice. For a time, the princess was okay with losing some food. For the winter was long and little creatures needed to eat too. But then small items started to disappear as well. Spoons and plates, forks and knives, and blankets. It was as if every time she was in one part of the house, something disappeared in another room. It can't be birds or mice, said the princess. I think I have a thief. So she went outside to look for traces in the snow and noises in the wind, but there was nothing to be found nor to be heard. Strange, said the princess. Maybe the thief is hiding inside my house. For many days she hunted, looking behind the curtains and under the bed, in the attic and the chimney, behind the poles and under the carpets, but she found nothing. And as she searched, food kept on disappearing night after night. I will make a cake, frowned the princess, a big cake with every egg and fruit and nut I still have, so that I only have one thing to keep my eye on. She spent the whole day making the cake and using everything she had left. The cake she made was so big she could hardly carry it. If I manage to protect the cake, I'll be able to survive the long winter, she said. So she added a lock onto the oven and she kept the big cake safe inside. But the next morning the lock had been opened and the cake had disappeared. At first the princess cried, because that cake was the last of her food until the snow melted. But then she noticed 2 trails of tiny feet in the spilled flour, and she followed the tracks to a hidden hatch in the floorboards. This is how the princess realized that 2 tiny thieves were living under the wooden house right below her feet. The princess makes new friends. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. She had been living alone just fine for a very long time, until the day she noticed food and small items were disappearing from her house. Thefts went on until the day her last cake, which had been made with the last of her eggs, the last of her fruit, the last of her nuts, and the last of her flour. The last cake was stolen too, and all she found at the scene of the crime were 2 trails of tiny feet in the spilled flour, leading to a hidden hatch in the floorboards. The princess did not try to open the hatch, nor did she try to break it. She was too tired and too hungry. All she could do was cry in silence, alone in the big wooden house, hidden in the ancient and deep forest. She cried for a long time, until evening arrived, and then she cried some more. Suddenly, a tiny voice came from under the house. "What is that noise you make?" it asked. "We do not like it, not one bit." "I'm crying because you 2 are mean to me, whoever you are. You stole all the food I had, and I still starve before the end of this long and cold winter." The hatch opened just a peep, revealing 2 frowning faces peering out from the darkness of their hideout. "But we're hungry too," said the second creature. We have been hiding in this cave for a long time, and now the winter is upon us and we need food. The princess dried her eyes and smiled at the two goblins. If we were friends, we could share the cake you stole from me. The two thieves spat and smirked. A friend? What is that? The princess frowned, for she realized that the two tiny thieves were as lonely as she was. A friend is someone you love and care for, someone you would never hurt. We never hurt each other, and we care for each other, said the goblin at the same time. Does it mean we are friends? Yes, that's exactly it. And if we were friends, you would not hurt us? Of course not. Friends trust each other. The goblins shook their little heads. We trust no one, for no one trusts us. Their words made the princess cry again. For now she understood the two creatures were not only as lonely as she was here in the big wooden house, but they had been lonely since they were born. You're making that noise again, frowned the goblins. Please stop that, for it makes us feel unhappy. Are you a witch? Is this some sort of magic? It makes you unhappy because we are friends, said the princess. We don't know you, and you're not like us. Sometimes friendship comes right away, even between people who are very different. Does it mean we can't steal from you anymore? Yes, but that's what we do. We are the crafty goblins who live under your house. Well, then maybe we could arrange something. Is that what friends do? Yes, I believe they do. And this is how the princess met the crafty goblins and how they became friends. There was one part in the story where I got confused right here. Okay, the goblins say you're making that noise again. Because she's crying. And the princess says, it makes you unhappy because we are friends. I'm very confused. I think they read something wrong in here. Well, never mind. We're not getting hung up on this. We're progressing to the bear's big paws. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the old bear was out looking for a snack when he spied a bee's nest in a hole high up a tree. The tree was dry and brittle, but the old bear was hungry, and so he made his way to the nest. But when he got there, he found his giant paw couldn't fit into the hole. Determined, he tried to force it inside, but the effort caused the branch below him to snap. The old bear tumbled to the ground and landed with a painful oomph. He lay there, stunned from the fall, when all of a sudden something bit him. The bite was followed by another and another and another. Carpenter ants were swarming up his legs. You see, they had been nesting in the branch, and they did not appreciate being forced from their home. The old bear howled and jumped to his feet to dance around as he sweated and snapped. But his big paws couldn't do much about the tiny ants. When he had finally managed to squish or scare them all off, the old bear heard someone laughing. The crafty goblins had seen the whole thing. Clumsy old bear, they teased. Those big old paws aren't good at anything, are they? Then they sped off, leaving old bear's pride hurting just bad as his body. He lumbered through the forest, hungry and sad. Maybe I'm just a clumsy old bear, he moaned, and my big old paws aren't good at anything. At that moment, the old bear heard a sad, sad noise. What's that? He wondered, and he followed the sound to where a mountain goat stood atop a boulder light up a hillside. Old bear, she cried. Old bear, please help me. My kid is stuck. Sure enough, a tiny mountain goat was trapped inside the stones, bleating sadly. The old bear began to walk towards them and then stopped. I'm probably just going to make it worse, he thought. But then the goat kid started to bleat even louder, and the old bear put away his fear. He climbed up to where the goat was trapped, careful of where he stepped and trying not to think of how he had only just fallen out of a tree. Every now and then, the ground would slide away from under his feet, but he kept going. When he reached the goat kid, he put his mighty paws against one of the boulders and began to push. At first, it didn't budge, but he dug in and pushed even harder. Finally, the boulders parted just wide enough to let the kid scramble to safety. The old bear released the boulder and let out a roar of triumph. Roar! Thank you, gushed the mama goat, and she and her kid bounded off up the mountain. The old bear watched them go with a smile, and then made his way back down the hillside, wiggling his rump in triumph as he went. To his surprise, the crafty goblins waited at the bottom of the hill. "We saw the whole thing," they said. "You were wrong. You aren't just a clumsy old bear, and your paws are good for helping others." The old bear forgave the goblins for doubting him, because he had doubted himself just as much. He never again thought his paws weren't good at anything, even though sometimes they weren't always great at everything. And that was how the old bear proved that his heart was bigger than his paws. So there's been stuff written below, but apparently I cannot uncover what's been there. Wrong direction. The moon hag loses her name. Once upon a time, in a deep and cold lake in an ancient forest, there lived an old seal who was a powerful witch in a disguise. He was mean and cruel. He liked nothing more than to swim in the deepest part of the lake, where the light was dim under the ice, admiring the corpses of the many victims she tricked into the water over the years. She was so hateful that only the cold water of the lake could keep her cool. Her most prized possession was a tin mirror sold to her by the secret keeper, and she kept it in a chest at the bottom of the lake. It was no ordinary mirror. If you looked in it, you would see a reflection of who you truly desire to be. And for 1 hour, the mirror granted you the power to appear as that person. Whenever a boat or an unwise traveler approached the edge of the lake, the old witch used the mirror to appear as the beautiful woman she always wished to be. And with this disguise, she lured the unfortunate sailor or wanderer into the deep and cold water. There, the old seal forced the victim to become her servant, and when she was done with them, they joined her collection of corpses in the deep part of the lake. I have no idea what it's about. One day, when the old seal swam down to her den under the lake, she discovered that someone had stolen her mirror. The chest where she kept her most prized possession had been forced open, and now it was empty. Who would have committed such a crime? Who had dared to deprive her of her only treasure? The old seal went mad, and her anger heated the water of the lake around her. For a time, everyone was happy with the temperature change, for the weather suddenly became sweeter and the air warmer. But after a few weeks, things started to get ugly. First, the fish began to die off, for they would not live in the hot water. Then the glaciers began to melt, and the water of the lake rose and spilled out, flooding the forest and the meadows. And finally, the weather grew so hot that even the Ice King himself was awakened from his long sleep and decided to see what was going on. In the deepest part of the lake, he found the mad witch steaming among the corpses of her victims, so angry that the lake was about to boil. It only took a few minutes for the Ice King to understand what had happened and demand that the thieves present themselves before him. The thieves had no choice but to appear, for no one dared to disobey the Ice King. The crafty goblins presented themselves, mirror in hand. "Why did you steal the mirror?" asked the king. "We were curious. We just wanted to see what really wanted to be," apologized the goblins. "But the stupid thing is broken. We look the same." "That does not mean it did not work," smiled the Ice King. "Now, apologize and give the mirror to me. for it is too powerful to be used by thieves or a mean old hag. The goblins apologized and gave the mirror to the Ice King, but the old seal was still angry. And what about me? She asked. I have been deprived of my treasure, and I demand compensation. The Ice King frowned as he spoke again. Old hag, you are mean and cruel, but I concede you have been wronged. For now, you will be allowed to leave the lake and walk the earth as the hag you really are, but only when the moon is full. And you, goblins, you had better stay away from the lake, for I won't protect you from the moon hag's wrath. And this is how the two goblins forced the moon hag to change her name. This is very interesting. I hope this all somehow ties in back to what we already know about the game, and I'm just realizing the corpses that are written scribbled down on the ground here. Morbid. The goblins trick the Mad Hunter. Once upon a time in a castle just beyond the ancient and deep forest, the Mad Hunter was punished by the Gold Lady for failing to return with the wise princess. For your failure, said the Gold Lady, I will take your left hand. You will return to the ancient and deep forest and hunt the wise princess. And if you can bring her back, I will return your hand to you. Fail again, and I will take your right hand. The Mad Hunter could hunt with just his right hand, but if he lost both his hands, he would never be able to hunt again and would no longer be a Mad Hunter, but only a madman. So the Mad Hunter returned to the ancient and deep forest, searching with his piercing eye for the wise princess. The crafty goblins were out searching for mischief when they saw the Mad Hunter on the prowl. We cannot let him find the princess, said the goblins, and so they devised a plan. It was wash day, and the princess had hung her beautiful gown out to dry. They stole it from the line and stuffed it full of straw, and then returned to where the Mad Hunter was scouring the paths of the forest. As the Mad Hunter turned down a path that would have led him to the big wooden house, the goblins danced the straw princess in and out of view in the opposite direction. The ruse worked. The hunter fixed his piercing eye on them and followed. Through the day and into the night, they led him away from the true princess. As night fell, the crafty goblins realized the error in their plan. The Mad Hunter was now hunting them. If he caught them, he would not be kind. So they put their heads together to come up with a plan. It did not take them long to realize where they should go. They led the Mad Hunter to the edge of the deep and icy lake, and when he came into view, they weighed the fake princess down with stones and dropped her into the frigid water, careful not to plunge into the depths themselves, lest the moon hag take her revenge on them. The Mad Hunter removed his clothing and dove in after the fake princess. He followed the shape of the thinking princess deep into the chilly water, down below where ice covered the lake's surface. Finally he caught her, but when he spun her toward him, he realized she had no head and that her body was stuffed with straw. And then he felt a slippery fin brush his shoulder as the moon hag loomed overhead. The next morning, the princess went to retrieve her gown from the clothing line and found that it was gone. She immediately suspected the goblins of mischief and called, "Goblins, did you take my gown?" The goblins emerged from their cave and nodded sadly. "Now what will I wear?" asked the princess, sad and angry that she had lost her only dress. Let us explain," said the goblins. So they told the princess the story of the Mad Hunter. And then they produced his clothing, which was a bit large for the princess, but much warmer than her beautiful gown. She immediately forgave them. "Thank you, my friends," she said, "for rescuing me and for this clothing, which will keep me much warmer in the winter than my beautiful gown." The Mad Hunter was forced to remain below the lake with the moon hag, but she did not kill him, because even reduced to just one hand, he was too useful a servant. No, he plotted the day he would emerge, to once again hunt the wise princess and earn back his left hand. And that is the story of how the crafty goblins rescued the wise princess from the mad hunter. And we're halfway through. And now the pelican helps her friends. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, an early winter storm blanketed everything in snow. It was so early in the year that the creatures of the forest were not yet ready for an ordinary winter, much less a bad one, and everyone agreed the storm was a sign the Ice King had plans for a long, cold winter. Princess had grown up in a kingdom where it was sunny all year long, and the goblins were very young, so no one in the big wooden house knew how to prepare for such a winter. The house was not well insulated, and they did not have enough fuel or food. Only the pious pelican noticed their plight, and when it came time to fly south with the other birds, her heart was heavy with sadness. What can I do? She thought. I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock? The time came to go, and the pelican struggled to take flight. It felt as though a leaden weight was struck right in the center of her chest. What can I do? She thought. I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock? She managed to take off, but only just barely, flapping fiercely to catch up with the other birds. As the pious pelican began her journey, the storm picked up, battering her to and fro. She had fallen well behind the flock, and she was already growing tired. But for all her challenges in the air, she could tell the things were much worse on the ground. A deep freeze had settled over the forest. The leaden weight in her chest grew heavier as she thought of the princess and the goblins. What can I do? I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock? The storm intensified, and the pelican was in a total whiteout. She knew she would have despaired, but all she could feel was the weight which had grown and grown until she thought she might drop out of the sky. She had felt called to help the princess and the goblins, but she had ignored it. I should have stayed, she thought. It was the right thing to do, and now I am lost with no way to make it right. Suddenly she was plucked from the sky and deposited in the hall of the Ice King. Pelican, he said, you were flying in circles around my mountain. I was lost, she said, weighed down by the weight of guilt in my heart. The Ice King stared at her sagely. Is it guilt, or is it something else? Open your beak. He reached down inside of her, pulling out a glowing stone. The pious pelican was surprised at how it filled her with warmth, chasing away cold and doubt. You know what you must do, said the Ice King. Pious pelican flew straight to the big wooden house. Snow had already blown in through its many cracks, and ice crept across the floorboards. She found the princess and the goblins huddled in front of the quiet hearth, nearly frozen solid. No, she cried, and then she placed the stone in the princess's lap. The warmth of it spread through the whole of the house, melting all that had frozen. The princess threw her arms around the pelican's chest, and the goblins clung to her legs. Thank you, they cried. You're welcome, said the pelican, smiling in deep satisfaction. What is it? Asked the princess, staring at the wonderful stone. At first, said the pelican, I thought it was my guilt, but when the Ice King pulled it out of me, I realized it was something much more powerful. Just then, the storm broke and the skies cleared. The pelican filled the big wooden house larder with food from her beak. And then she took to the skies, lightened by the knowledge that through her charity everyone in the big wooden house would be warm and fed until spring. And that is the story of how the pious pelican saved the wise princess and the crafty goblins from the long winter. I have to look that word up. Yeah, I don't know what a larder is, but never mind, okay. Sorry.
So,
No! No talk time to you, just story time. The goblins earn their voice. Once upon a time, in the deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblin spied on the secret keeper as she made her rounds, gathering up secrets that the animals of the forest had for sale. How, said the first goblin, does she get people's secrets? Do you suppose she peels open their heads? Let's find out, said the second. And so the goblins watched the secret keeper. They watched her until the stalwart moose came to her, head hanging low. It was my fault. I chose the uneven trail. I can't bear to remember. The secret keeper nodded and gazed into stalwart moose's eyes. Though the goblins couldn't hear anything, they knew she was speaking to the moose. For the secret keeper spoke in people's mind with the gift of the voice. After a few minutes, the stalwart moose blinked. I feel lighter, said Moose. Did I just give you something? The secret keeper nodded, handing him a coin. The stalwart moose nodded and plodded along down the trail. He spied the goblins hiding in the woods and narrowed his eyes, for he knew the goblins were often up to mischief. The two goblins whistled innocently, and the moose was forced to carry on because they were not doing anything obviously bad. I need to know what the secret was, said one of the goblins. Let's go buy it. So the goblins approached the secret keeper before she could stow away Moose's secret. We want to buy Moose's secret. What do you have to trade? Asked the secret keeper, her voice filling their minds. The goblins produced a silver-handled hairbrush they had stolen from the princess, and the secret keeper nodded. And that is how the goblins came to know that Moose's maid had tumbled down a cliffside to her death. The secret keeper moved on. The first of the goblins said, I want to know more. So the goblins followed the secret keeper, hoping to find where she hid the secrets. They followed her to the peak of a nearby ridge and watched as she stowed the rest of the day's secrets high in a cloud. When she had gone, they climbed a high spruce tree that disappeared into the misty sky. They reached out and just managed to dip their hands into the clouds. Their heads were filled with memories, and they snatched their hands back out as if they had just thrust them in boiling water. Tears poured down their cheeks. That was how the secret keeper found them, crying in the tree. You stole my secret, thieved the secret keeper. Give them back. The crafty goblins stopped crying because I saw an opportunity. What will you give us in exchange? They asked. I will give you back the silver-handled hairbrush, offered the secret keeper. For so many secrets? You'll have to offer more than that. What if, said the secret keeper, I shared the gift of voice? The crafty goblins grew excited. That will do. So the secret keeper shared the gift of voice with the goblins, and immediately they found that they could hear one another's thoughts and feel each other's feelings. The crafty goblins gave back the secrets they had taken and ran back to the big wooden house. There they found the princess preparing food. They tried to peer into her mind, but they found it was a blank. They tried to speak to her using only their own minds, but she could not hear them. It seemed the secret keeper was craftier than the crafty goblins, for she had only shared enough of her power to let the goblins use the gift of voice with each other, and not with the whole of the forest. Big Frog is punished. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a big frog in a small pond. She was no ordinary frog, for she had been given the gift of speech when she saved the princess from the mad hunter. From the morning to the evening, she did everything the other frogs did, except that she knew how to speak. Everybody in the forest could hear her loud voice, and everybody was unhappy with that because she never stopped babbling. She babbled about the too hot sun and the too deep pond, about the rain to come, and all the delicious fleas she had eaten. Across the forest, all the creatures tolerated the endless noise, until one day they could not deal with it anymore. They asked the big frog to quiet down. I can't, said the big frog. This is what I do. Before the princess kissed me, I croaked all day long, and you all liked that I did. This is the same, except you can understand what I say, and now you find it irritating. But I can't change what I am, can I? Could you? All the creatures agreed that she was right, and that it was rude of them to ask the big frog to stop doing what she had always done. So they returned to their own parts of the forest and let the big frog do what frogs have always done, jumping and talking some more about the too hot sun and the too deep pond, about the rain to come and the delicious flies they have eaten. And for a time it was all right. But in the forest, word traveled fast, and everyone has a story to tell. The big frog, being who she was, gossiped and gossiped about everything she overheard. She told the bees that old bear had stolen their precious honey 2 years ago, and she told the beavers that the eagles had stolen their precious wood. She told the deer who had killed her fawn, and she told the tall spruce who had carved a cuss word in its bark. Once again, everyone in the forest asked the big frog to keep quiet, for now everyone had a grudge against everyone else. But once again, the big frog would not listen. When I was just a frog, you never paid attention to me, and nobody helped me when the mad hunter hunted me for sport. This is only a right for a wrong, and I won't stop talking. The fuss went on, and the noise was so loud that the Ice King himself awoke and decided to see what was going on. Silence, bellowed the king, and even the big frog stopped babbling. Once the forest was quiet again, the Ice King patiently listened to what each and every animal of the forest had to say, until finally he made his mind. Big Frog, you have abused the gift of speech, for you have only used it to get revenge. Despite knowing that words can be hurtful, you threw them around without caution, and you caused too much trouble. The big frog opened her mouth to protest, but the Ice King raised his finger before she could say another word. Since you received the gift of speech for a good deed, I would not dare to take it away from you. So, here's your punishment. I will tell you the biggest of my secrets. It is a secret so powerful and so dangerous that it will frighten you. But if you ever reveal it to anyone. The Ice King bent down and whispered such potent words in the big frog's ear that the poor creature started to tremble. Now go on about your business, all of you, and try to forget what the big frog told you, for you all are living in the forest and you have nowhere else to go. And this is how the big frog irritated the Ice King and how she was punished. The goblin saves the old beaver. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, winter gave way to spring in a sudden burst of warm air that melted all the snow and all the ice all at once. The river swelled until it could no longer hold all the water in, and then it spilled out to create new rivers in places where no one was expecting them. The whole of the forest went into a panic, looking for shelter from the rising waters. The very old beaver had been walking on her dam when one of those new rivers came rushing right at her. She screeched and squealed, but whatever direction she ran, more water appeared. She was caught in the flooding, and though she had once been an excellent swimmer, age had taken its toll, and so the raging water carried her off at a speed she couldn't control. Help! She called. The crafty goblins had been running back to their cave under the big wooden house when they heard the beaver's cries. We have to have the beaver, one goblin said. You go one way and I'll go the other. They ran, keeping in touch with the gift of voice. Finally, one of them spotted her, twisting and tumbling in the river. But she was on the opposite side of the water, and the goblins could not reach her. "Brother," the sister goblin called out through the gift of voice. "I see her, but I can't get her. Maybe you can?" "I'll try." The goblin guided her brother so that he would hit the river in just the right spot to reach the beaver. The plan worked, and soon the second goblin appeared in just the right spot. "Beaver," he shouted, holding out a branch. "Grab a hold of this." The beaver grabbed it, but in her panic, she pulled the goblins in two. "No!" cried his sister. She ran as hard as her legs could go, managing to outpace the river and get ahead of the beaver and her brother. Searching for some means of getting them out, she spied a long hanging branch. They'd zip by it quickly, but if they were fast enough... "Brother," she cried out through the gift, "you're coming up on a low-hanging branch. You'll zip by it quickly, but if you're fast enough..." "Got it," said her brother, and then he said to the beaver, "Get ready to grab a hold of a low-hanging branch. We're going to zip by it quickly, but if you're fast enough..." Suddenly, they were right in front of it and reached out, snagging hold. So the water beat against them, trying to shake them loose. They pulled themselves along the branch, back to dry land. When they were all safe, the very old beaver thanked the goblins. "But how," she asked, "did you know just where to find me? And how did you know that branches was coming?" The goblins shared a secret smile. "Just lucky, I guess," they said. And that is how the goblins saved the very old beaver from the flooding river, and how she never knew how they did it. The goblins irritate the Ice King. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient wood, the crafty goblins were getting into all kinds of trouble. They'd woken up in a particularly mischief. They wanted to make trouble. And there was not a single denizen of the ancient forest who they did not manage to pull a prank on. They left a mud pie in the princess's kitchen so that when she dug in, she got a big mouthful of dirt. They used paint to draw silly pictures all over Moose's antlers while he slept. They told the mangy muskrat that his coat had been returned to its former glory, which made him very sad when he rushed to the water's edge and found he was, in fact, still mangy. They stole branches from the very old beaver's dam in order to have a sword fight, and they filled the old bear's den with burrs. Every time they ran away in a fit of giggles, never stopping to consider whether their jokes had done any harm. They were on their way to fill the pious pelican's beak full of bubbles when they were hoisted into the air by their legs. Though they trashed and shrouded, they found themselves staring into the face of the Ice King. "All morning," he said, "I have been hearing complaints about you two." "They're just pranks," said the goblins. "No one has really been hurt." "Oh no?" asked the king. He forced them to see how each of the victims of their pranks was doing. The princess had a stomach ache from swallowing the mud. The moose's antlers itched terribly where the paint had touched them. The muskrat was crying, sad at being reminded what his vanity had cost him. The very old beaver's den was flooded, and the old bear was trying to get the burrs out of his fur, but finding most of them hopelessly tangled. "For your punishment," said the Ice King, "you must help each of them undo the harm you caused. If you do a good enough job of this, there will be no further punishment. If you do not, you will have to give me your noses so that you can no longer stick them into other people's business." Now, the goblins liked their noses right where they were in the middle of their faces, so they set about making things right. They baked a real pie for the princess and brewed her a tea that would settle her stomach. They scrubbed the moose's antlers clean and then covered them in soothing mud. They sat by the river with the muskrat, listening as he talked in great detail about his old coat, and they did their best to point out all the things that were still handsome about him, like his proud whiskers and sparkling eyes. They let the very old beaver rest while they repaired all the damage done to her den, and finally they removed every burr from old bear's fur even the ones that were hopelessly tangled. In the end, they came before the Ice King to see if they had done enough. The Ice King surveyed the forest and found that everyone seemed to be back to normal. "What did you learn?" asked the Ice King. "That our pranks can make people feel bad," said the goblins. The Ice King smiled and nodded. "Yes, action have consequences. In case you forget, I'm going to leave you with a reminder. Whenever one of your pranks is going to hurt someone, you are going to feel a little pit in your stomach. That will be your punishment and your warning." So, every time after that, the goblins set out to do a prank that went a little too far. They felt a little pit in their stomachs and they were forced to consider whether it was the right thing to do. And that is how the goblins irritated the Ice King and how they were punished. The pelican forgives the goblins. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, there lived a pair of crafty goblins in a cave below a big wooden house. They lived with a wise princess who shared as much food with them as she was able. But it was never quite enough. This left the goblins hungry, very hungry, always hungry. One day, as they were out foraging for food, the pious pelican landed on a rock and dumped a smorgasbord from her beak, which the goblins knew was matching it never emptied. There were king crabs in red, blue, gold, and scarlet, veiny blue shrimp, pink-shelled scallops, oblong brown clams, purple spiny urchins, and even one prickly red sea cucumber. The food just kept coming. They watched as the pelican ate one clam and then took a nap. "Do you think she would mind if we took just a little?" asked one goblin to the other. "Her beak never empties. She won't possibly miss a couple of crabs," said the second, licking her lips. They were agreed, and so they crept over, fished some crabs, and ran. The goblins scarfed the crabs, but when they finished, they found that they were still hungry. "She won't miss a handful of shrimp," said one goblin to the other. The goblins scarfed the shrimp, but when they finished, they found that they were still hungry. "Maybe also a few scallops?" said one goblin to the other. The goblins scarfed the scallops, but when they were finished, they found that they were still hungry. So they went back for clams, and then urchins, and finally even the sea cucumber. Finally they were not hungry, but there was also nothing left. Just then the pelican woke up. "What happened to my food?" she asked. Unable to lie about it, the goblins confessed their crime. The pelican was dismayed, but she was a charitable-hearted bird, and she could tell the crafty goblins were growing little creatures. "Goblins," said the pious pelican, "I will share my food with you, but you must in return follow my example and be as generous with others as I am with you. Take that to heart, and I will have considered your debt paid." "But we have nothing to give," said the goblins. "You have your nimble hands and your crafty brains and your loving hearts," said the pelican. Crafty goblins realized how much they had to give, and for the rest of the day they looked for ways to help the other creatures of the forest. They found the starwood moose struggling with an itchy, hard-to-reach spot on his back, and so they climbed up and gave it a good scratching. Next, they helped the old bear. He could not get the honey out of a narrow beehive. They climbed up to the top of the tree with the hive and then dropped it, cracking it open. Finally, they found the princess, crying over a loss she would not speak about. So they wrapped their little arms around her in a great big hug and stayed until she felt better. When they were done, they returned to the pious pelican. "Did it feel good being as generous as I am?" asked the pelican. "It did," said the goblins. "I'm glad," said the pelican. "We all have problems that we can't solve on our own. But if everyone goes about with generosity in their hearts, then there's always someone on hand to help. But we all must commit to do so, or there may be no one there to help you when you need it." This made sense to the goblins, and they thanked the pious pelican for her food and the lesson. Of course, by this time they were hungry again, and that remained an ongoing problem until the day the starwood moose taught them to fish, but that is another story. And that is how the pious pelican forgave the crafty goblins and how she taught them charity. The goblins meet the ice troll. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, crafty goblins were awake long after they should have been asleep. One goblin said to the other, "Let's go explore the forest." Now, the goblins were not in the habit of exploring the forest late at night, and they did not know what they would find, but this did not scare them off. They crept out of their beds, bundled up, and went exploring. It was dark. The light of the moon was just enough to keep them from walking into trees, but they could not see more than 15 feet in front of them. Every time a twig snapped or branches rattled, they considered turning back, but they didn't. And so they had ventured far beyond the house into a part of the forest they were not familiar with, when they realized the snapping of twigs and the rattling of branches had become steady. Something was following them. They turned to run, but a hulking figure emerged from the darkness, sweeping them up with a giant hand and stuffing them into a burlap sack. The goblins wiggled and cried out, but the sack remained shut as their captors stomped through the forest, singing, "Whittle diddle dum, whittle dee, in his bag's a meal for me. Whittle diddle dum, whittle diddle dee, in this bag's a meal for me." After a lot of thumping and thudding, the bag opened, and the goblins were dumped into a giant iron pot full of warming water. A huge troll stood overhead, grinning down at them through long, bushy, white eyebrows. "I am the ice troll, and you are my dinner." Ready to cook the goblins, saying, "Whittle diddle dum, dum dee dee, there's soon to be a soup for me." Finishing his ditty, he bent over to stoke the fire beneath the pot and let out the loud noise of pain, rubbing a spot on his back that always ached. The troll stood painfully and walked over to a stone shelf where he began to chop potatoes. One of the goblins had an idea. She whispered to her brother, "Follow my lead." The goblin stretched out in the water, floating and letting out sighs of contentment. "Ah," said one of the goblins, "this is the most relaxed I've ever been." "My body feels so good. I think I could run 100 miles without stopping," said the second. The troll peered at them. They weren't supposed to be happy about being in the cook pot, but they certainly looked like they were. "Troll," said the goblins, "if your back is hurting, you should try sitting in the water, just for a little bit, before it gets too hot." Troll stomped over. "But if I take you out, then you will escape and there would be no soup for me." "Put us back in the sack," suggested the goblins, "then we can't run away." This made sense to the troll. The spot on his back that always ached was still bothering him, and the goblins couldn't go anywhere if they were trapped. So he stuffed the goblins back in the sack and climbed into the soup pot. He stretched out and let out a sigh of contentment. Meanwhile, the goblins threw themselves around in the sack until it began to swing. The troll was so relaxed he didn't even notice. The bag dropped onto the shelf where the troll had been chopping potatoes, and the goblins pushed it up against the edge of the troll's knife, sawing a hole. Then they made a break for it. The troll finally noticed what they were doing and roared out in anger. But he was so relaxed that when he tried to chase them, he tumbled out of the cook pot and into the flames, catching his bushy eyebrows on fire. The goblins ran and ran and ran as fast as they could through the ancient and deep forest, until they were back in the cave and safe in their beds. They vowed never to venture out in the ancient and deep forest late at night again, for they did not think they'd get so lucky as to trick the ice troll twice. And that is the story of how the crafty goblins met the ice troll, and why they never did again. Okay. The goblins tricked the muskrat. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient wood, there lived a muskrat. The muskrat was a lazy, cowardly creature who did little but lay around in the sun, cleaning his beautiful coat until it shone. One day, the muskrat found the crafty goblins playing King of the Mountain on his favorite rock. He was too cowardly to confront them directly, and so he retreated to a safe distance and then pitched a stone right at a hornet's nest hanging overhead. One of the goblins saw him do it, but before she could say anything, the hornets emerged, furious, and chased the goblins away, stinging them. With the rock empty, the musk claimed his spot. When the goblins returned, they asked the muskrat, "Why did you do that?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, turning away to ignore them. The goblins knew that the muskrat cared for nothing but his coat, so they devised to steal it in order to teach him a lesson. As the muskrat lay in the sun, he spied the goblins strutting by. The skin was covered in flecks of gold. "Goblins," called the muskrat, "what happened to make your skin shine that way?" "When we were attacked by the hornets, we ran and ran until we found a pool by the glacier. We dove in and then came out this way. Would you show me this pool?" asked the muskrat. Crafty goblins led the muskrat to a pool. The muskrat looked at the pool skeptically. "It looks like a pool," he said. The goblins chuckled and shrugged. "You don't have to jump in if you don't want to, but what do you lose if you try? And if it works, why, you will be the most beautiful creature in the whole of the forest." With visions of his splendid coat in mind, the muskrat jumped in. When he emerged, he was disappointed to find that nothing had changed. Said one goblin. "Maybe you have to be stung by the hornets first, just like us." The muskrat hesitated, because getting stung would be painful. Seeing his hesitation, the goblin added, "If it works, you will be the most beautiful creature in the whole of the forest." The muskrat decided it was worth it, so he returned to the hornet's nest and pitched a stone against it. The hornets emerged, even more furious this time. They chased the muskrat, stinging him repeatedly until he jumped into the magic pool. The muskrat was disappointed to find that once again nothing had changed. "I wonder if the magic only works for us," said one of the goblins. "Would you like me to jump in with your coat?" The muskrat hesitated. "If it works, you will be the most beautiful creature in the world, in the whole of the forest." With visions of his splendid coat in mind, the muskrat agreed. He slipped it off and handed it to the goblins. Without his coat, the muskrat was pale and covered in scabbing welts. Instead of jumping into the pool, one of the goblins ran away with the coat, laughing. The other pushed Muskrat into the frigid pool, and as water splashed the goblin, the gold flecks ran, revealing that they had only ever been painted on. The muskrat cried so pitifully and made such a clamor that he awoke the Ice King, who came down to the forest to see what had happened. When the Ice King saw the muskrat, he laughed, only further infuriating the creature. "Tell me what happened," said the Ice King. Both the muskrat and the goblins told their sides of the story, and the Ice King considered the case before him. "It is true that the muskrat is vain, and he thinks of nothing but himself," concluded the Ice King. "But he needs something to keep him warm in the water and the snow." So the Ice King was decided. The muskrat would get his coat back, but it would be patchy and unkempt. After that day, he became known as Mangy Muskrat. And that is how the goblins tricked the muskrat into giving up his coat and how he got his name. Okay, second to last. The moose teaches the goblins. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins were hungry. This wasn't unusual. The goblins were always hungry. But today they were particularly hungry. They opened the wise princess's cupboards to look for a snack, but all she had was a small pile of nuts and berries and just one strip of dried fish. The goblins grabbed it all and gobbled it up, but they were still hungry. They went out into the woods to look for more to eat. First, they dropped by the small pond. The big frog was asleep, and beside the pond was a pile of insects she had caught for eating after she woke up. The goblins crept up to the pile, careful not to wake the big frog. As they got close, it ribbited loudly and they froze. but the big frog kept sleeping. So they grabbed up the pile of insects and gobbled it up, but they were still hungry. As they crept back into the woods, they found the stalwart moose watching them. Did you just steal the big frog's food? The goblins tried not to look guilty, but failed. She said we could have them, they cried. Oh, really? Asked the moose. Let's ask her. So Moose woke up Big Frog and asked, Did you say the goblins could have your food? The big frog looked at the goblins, who she knew were always hungry, and nodded. Yeah, I did. Really? Asked the moose, surprised. Frog nodded, and the moose sighed. All right then, he said, and he had to let the goblins go. The next stop was the river. They watched as old bear swiped at a leaping salmon, catching it deftly in his large paws. He lay it out upon a rock and left it to dry, lumbering into the woods to seek out some berries. The crafty goblins crept up to the rock, careful in case old bear returned. They reached the rocks, grabbed the salmon and gobbled it all up, but they were still hungry. As they crept back into the woods, the stalwart moose was once again waiting for them. Are you going to tell me old bear said you could have that? Yeah, replied the goblins. Old bear ambled up at that moment, and Moose asked him, Did you leave that fish for the goblins? Old bear looked at the goblins, who he knew were always hungry, and nodded. I did, he said. Really? Asked the moose. Really, he said the old bear. After Moose left, old bear said to the goblins, Be sure to tell the princess I was kind to you, and don't steal my fish again. The goblins, still hungry, went out looking for one more meal. They crept up to the mangy muskrat's lodge and began to climb inside when they were dragged right back out. The stalwart moose dangled them by the seats of their pants and said, Now, I know Mangy Muskrat didn't tell you that you could eat his food because he blames you for his coat being ruined. Besides, he barely has enough for himself and doesn't share with anyone. The goblins began to protest, but he shook his head. He set the goblins down and said, Come with me. The goblins followed the stalwart moose to a part of the river where it ran slow enough for them to walk into safely. He gave them each a fishing line and said, I am going to teach you to fish so that when you're hungry, you do not need to steal from the animals of the forest. It will be hard work, but it will be honest. The crafty goblins were not against working hard. They were just hungry, and so they listened to Moose and soon pulled wriggling fish out of the river. They ate them up, and finally they were no longer hungry. And that is how the moose came to teach the crafty goblins to fish. And now onto the last story. The Mad Hunter gets his hand back. Once upon a time, in a deep and cold lake near the ancient forest, there lived an old seal who was a powerful witch. After angering the Ice King, she had been bound to the lake, allowed only to venture out when the moon was full, and only looking like the hag she truly was. For years she dreamed of vengeance, all alone within the deep lake among the corpses of her many previous victims. One night she awoke to see a black and hooded silhouette clawing to reach a beautiful gone full of stone. The human had delved far deeper into the lake than any land dweller should have been able to go. His tenacity and ferociousness impressed the moon hag, and she decided he would be wasted in her statuary of corpses. She used her magic to enspell him, allowing him to breathe underwater, but also binding him to her service. You, she said, will be the instrument of my release and my revenge. For you and I together will kill the Ice King. The moon hag had never heard of the Mad Hunter, and she did not know the power he wielded. He could only tell he was a hunter, and her lust for revenge blinded her to the threat he posed. She gifted him a hand of ice, which was not as nimble as a hand of flesh, but allowed him to serve her better than no hand at all. The Moon Hag spent years devising the perfect plan to kill the Ice King, and years more moving all the pieces into place to execute it. In the meantime, the Mad Hunter served her, guarding her chest of treasures and plotting his own plots. Finally, everything was prepared. The full moon rose, and the Moon Hag stepped on land, giddy at the thought she would never have to leave again, if it did not please her. She brought the Mad Hunter to his post, a jagged peak of ice and stone from which she would loose the arrow that would slay the Ice King. Before she would go, he put forward a proposal. Moon Hag, said the Mad Hunter, if you grow back my missing hand, I would be certain to hit the Ice King with my arrow. We will have only one shot, and I would hate to miss. You are a powerful witch, so you'll be able to craft sticks to bind me to this place that I cannot break. The Moon Hag considered it. All right, I will grow back your hand and then bind you here with ties that will not break. She cast a spell, and the Mad Hunter's hand of ice was replaced with a hand of flesh. As the witch left to complete the next part of her plan, the Mad Hunter grinned wickedly in the moonlight. After a short time, the Moon Hag returned, luring the Ice King into the Mad Hunter's line of sight. What is this about, Moon Hag? Asked the Ice King. Many a long year have you bound me to the lake, said the Moon Hag. Many a long year have I been alone in the dark. That ends tonight. She cast a powerful spell that made the Ice King slow to react, and then gave the signal. Mad Hunter, she cried, let your arrow fly. Nothing happened. She twitched nervously. Mad Hunter, she growled. Let your arrow fly. Still, nothing happened. The Ice King, meanwhile, was striding toward her, slow but furious. The Moon Hag fled, running first to the jagged piece of ice and stone where her servant should have waited, but the peak was empty. The ties had been broken, and the Mad Hunter was gone. For in the end, he was the more powerful of the two, especially once he had two hands. When the Ice King finally caught the hag, his furious voice could be heard throughout the forest. For your wickedness, you will be eternally bound to the lake. You will no longer be allowed to leave, not even under a full moon. The Moon Hag was imprisoned in the lake, and she never again tried to escape. And this is how the Mad Hunter escaped the Moon Hag, and how he got his left hand back. And this is the whole book of Goblins. So I want to look at some of the details before I close off the stream. So we have the Bear and the Princess at page -7, and I don't understand why it's page -7. And maybe it's not a 7. There's also a sort of minus before the -31. Okay, and I also want to look for the OA insignia that I saw in some of the stories. So just looking closely at the pages. Looking for little hints and details. So we have the first OA at the Goblins and the Ice Cave. Which is also, I think this is a symbol in the game when a decision is made. The Goblins and the Ice Cave is 19. Okay. And I have no idea what OA could mean. It's another OA. Another OA. Another OA. And this one was the first story where I noticed edits. OA could be original Anne or something. I think her mother is called Mary Ann. This one is OA2. This one had the numbers we needed for a puzzle. Another OA. Another OA. Another OA. So maybe the OAs are by her mother and the others are by the kids. But yeah. That's it for today, I think. I have no idea
What is it?
where the
It was
game
just
saved.
Sam's.
I guess we're listening to
He's not
those
our
two.
father.
How do you know?
I asked him, point blank.
I'm not surprised. Burning down the barn didn't really seem like a Sam move.
Yeah, I guess it was silly to suspect him in the first place. He'd never hurt Mary Ann's kids. There's something else. Look at this. This was taken in 1992 when Mary Ann first moved to Delos Crossing. See that ladder? Sam told me the barn has a loft. He helped her build it. Apparently she never told anyone about it.
And it's still there?
As far as he knows, yeah. What do you think? Should we give it a shot?
We've come this far. And a hidden loft? That's got secret shit written all over it.
Let's go.
I might as well finish this off now. I cannot go into the secret shed now.
Ugh, what a mess. That's not gonna help us get this house sold.
Yeah, we got our deadbeat dad to thank for that.
So obviously the ladder's gone, but what about that handle? Is it still here somewhere?
What do you think is up there?
I don't know. I'm trying not to speculate. My brain was going to some real dark places.
Don't worry. Whatever's up there, I'll protect you.
We'll see how chivalrous you feel when you've got bats in that perfectly coiffed hair.
The handle should be behind this.
Ah, there it is.
Let me change the stream title. A secret room?
It's opening up.
The secret keeper always did store all the best secrets in the clouds.
Yep. Come on, let's find a way to climb up there.
Well, that's way too high to jump. You want to give me a leg up?
I'm so not touching your nasty shoes. We'll find a ladder.
Got one. Anything else I want to pick?
Can you see anything?
Nope, nada.
Why are you lying? I can see a lot of glowing things.
Here, found a switch.
Holy shit. Well, that shaved a few years off my life. Whoa.
It's
Her story.
Look, she left us something.
It's got a combination lock with letters.
Do you think she hid the code somewhere in all this?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing Mary Ann, probably.
Well, you want to do this?
Yeah. Let's start here.
Actually, we are going to look at this room next stream. So I just thought this is the last stream, but it's Tuesday and there will be another stream on Thursday. So we will look at those things next time. And this will be amazing. So stay tuned for it. Thanks for hanging for my reading hour and see you on Thursday. Bye bye.